Hey, everybody, welcome to Downballot Roundup in partnership with Leave No Dem Behind, where I introduce you to Democratic candidates running in local elections throughout the country. I'm Brian Randolph, and today I am here with the former mayor of Wheeling, West Virginia, Glenn Elliott, who is running for the U.S. Senate representing the state of West Virginia, the seat currently held by Joe Manchin, who has endorsed you, as I understand. Congratulations. Hello, Glenn. It's good to meet you and good to have you and have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Why don't we start with telling me a little bit about you?
Sure. The long version or the short version? Because I have one of
Eh,
each.
Go with whatever feels comfortable.
Sure. I was
Introduce yourself.
born and raised in Wheeling. Graduated high school in 1990, and at the time, Wheeling's population during my first 18 years of life dropped by about a third. Everyone was leaving. So when I turned 18, I decided to get out of Dodge. I went to the University of Pennsylvania for college. I actually studied at the Wharton School there. Intended to go work in a finance career, but I picked up a minor in political science, and that sort of altered the trajectory of life a little bit. Landed an internship with Senator Robert Byrd in D.C. in his Senate office. And then upon graduation, I started working for him as a legislative assistant, did that for 5 years. Really incredible opportunity to learn from one of the Senate greats of just see the way the Senate at the time still worked pretty well. People forget that in the 1990s we actually balanced the budget. We had a Democratic president and a Republican Congress. They didn't like each other very much, but they were able to sit down in the same room together and actually compromise. And by 1999, when I left the Senate to go on to law school, there was a balanced budget in this country, and people do forget that. It's the last time we have done so, and I think if elected to the Senate, I'd like to see us get back on that trajectory. I went on to law school at Georgetown, then began a career working, in the big law firm world. Did that for about 7.5, 8 years, and really just. I never really fell in love with it. It wasn't a passion of mine. I once I paid off all my student loan debt, I turned in my notice and I quit there in 2008 and moved back home to Wheeling to kind of take some time off. Just I knew if I stayed in DC, all my savings would be quickly eaten up in the cost of my mortgage there. So I sold what I had and moved back to Wheeling and just planned to take maybe a year off and figure it out. I was 38 at the time, and that was a very a fortuitous decision, I guess I'd say, because I came back into Wheeling and I fell in love with it. Even though I'd grown up here, I'd never really appreciated a lot of the assets. So I fell in love with Wheeling. I ended up buying an old building in a vacant building in our downtown, a building that really was emblematic of the city's past greatness. It was built in 1891. It was the tallest building in the entire state of West Virginia at the time, 6 stories. And I was able to buy it for $70,000 because people had just given up on our downtown. I made that a sort of a project. Ultimately moved into it. Got the first floor renovated. Have a couple companies in there renting it out, a couple law firms, and then moved into the second floor where I now live with my wife and son. And I still have 4 floors above us that are ongoing projects, but we're doing it piecemeal. We just put a new roof on it, and it's been an incredible project. Got me involved in sort of local politics. I decided to run for mayor in 2016. As a decided underdog, I was able to win that race. Then won again in 2020, could not run for third term. So I actually left office on July 1st of this year of 2024. And then when Senator Manchin decided to call it quits as a senator, I gave a lot of thought to jumping into this race, knowing that here in West Virginia, it's an uphill battle for a Democrat right now for statewide office. There's no doubt about that. But I really felt like this was a race where I had something to offer with experience working in the Senate and then 8 years as mayor working with our two senators to bring resources back. I felt like I could see it from both ends of the equation, and I certainly felt like I'd be a better fit for that job than Governor Jim Justice, who I knew would be the likely Republican nominee. So that's I guess, the medium version. I hope that works.
That works, yeah. All right, and I will say, having spent plenty of time in Wheeling, West Virginia, for those of you who
Yeah,
don't know, Wheeling is incredibly beautiful. One of the
yeah,
most beautiful cities I've ever been to. It's really stunning. A lot of
yeah.
Victorian, beautiful
Our
houses, and just
Victorian
lovely.
architecture for a city of our size, I think, is unparalleled. We're only a city of 27,000, but we have such a rich stock of buildings built all between 1885 maybe and 1928. It's a great thing to see. If you like architecture, it's worth a tour.
It's beautiful. My uncle grew up in St. Clairsville, so I used to come
Okay.
back and forth
Yeah.
quite a bit. Um, so I'd like to know, you've got your Hill experience, you have the legal background, you have the mayoral, the executive background. How do the three of those come together to make you a really good candidate
Yeah.
for Senate? How would you pull that together to work in the Senate?
Well, I mean, so much of the job is just it's work ethic and commitment. I saw from Senator Byrd, the effort that he put into it. And so I have an appreciation of the Senate as an institution. It's played a big role in some of the big legislative compromises in American history. And the way Byrd did that was, frankly, the way he made himself relevant, not only being there a long time, but it was actually building relationships across the aisle. Some of his best friends were on the Republican side of the aisle, and that and to a lot of people's surprise, one of his other best friends was probably the farthest left senator at the time, Ted Kennedy. So he had relationships across the spectrum of the Senate. Was able to deliver for West Virginia time and time again. Of course, being a lawyer, I think, is I know lawyers have a bad reputation, but I think it's a pretty, it's a pretty relevant job experience for someone who's in the business of making laws, actually having a law degree. So I think that does certainly help. And then being mayor really, I think, is the most relevant experience just recently because it gives me a front row seat for what cities in West Virginia need. A lot of cities in our state feel like we don't have a partner in our state legislature that sometimes sees cities sort of almost as their adversary or as their competitor. It's a very bizarre scenario we have here in West Virginia where cities are sometimes the redheaded stepchildren. Being a senator, I would want to partner with cities directly with cities to give them the tools that they need to bring themselves back. We've my 8 years as mayor in Wheeling, we've had about $500 million of public and private investment here. That's more than the prior 50 years combined. If you come to Wheeling right now, I can see it out my window. There's a lot of orange, and orange. Maybe a temporary inconvenience, but those orange barrels and all those orange cones are leading the way to a lot of progress coming down the road. And I think it's not a stretch to say that maybe by 2026, 2027, Wheeling will be sort of the it city to visit when you come to West Virginia.
And we've sort of skipped around this, but Senator Byrd was the chair of the Appropriations Committee, secured a total of $1 billion for public works in West Virginia, and he set a goal too, and I think he passed that mark. Let's see here, more than 30 existing or pending federal
Yeah,
projects bear his name. I mean, he brought a huge amount of building and work to West Virginia, and really put so much work into that state.
sure.
So I really would like to hear
Yeah.
that's part
Well,
of what
the
what the mayoral part brings to you.
Well, let me just say, running this campaign now, driving in every corner and holler of West Virginia, we're driving over so many roads and bridges that were brought here by Senator Byrd. And it's great for me now, 30 plus years later, after working for the man, to see directly the fruits of all that effort that he put into the job. He made it a point to bring resources back. He got a lot of criticism from other members of Congress, but at the end of the day, West Virginia is the least flat state in the country. There's almost no places where you can just when you're building a highway, it can just be a straight stretch. You have to go up over mountains or hills. You have to cross a lot of waterways, and so it's very expensive per mile to put roads here. And that's one of the reasons our state never really developed a lot like a lot of other cities on the eastern. Sort of seaboard did because it's really expensive to develop here. And so you had a lot of pockets of communities that weren't connected. So he made connecting those communities a priority. Some of those projects, they're called the corridor projects in West Virginia, are still in progress and still need funding to be finished. But that's a way just to connect West Virginia more to the outside world. Driving around the state for the last 8, 9 months in this campaign, when you're doing your Google Maps to see where it goes, at first, the first mileage it gives you there is as the crow flies mileage. And then it calculates as you drive mileage, and it always adds about 30, 40, 50% to as the crow flies mileage because you're going in roundabout ways to get from A to B. That makes just living here more expensive and more costly for folks. So, we need to connect our communities better. We need to give a lot of communities help with underground infrastructure, water, sewer. A lot of places are having issues. We actually had a drought this summer, so you have a lot of communities having issues, getting a sort of clean water into their communities, just because we didn't get much water this summer. And if climate change continues to impact us in some ways, you never know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of things that I see as mayor and I've seen in this campaign that I would like to help the state advance with. And I think I really do bring a fresh perspective as opposed to my opponent in this race, Governor Jim Justice, who, quite frankly, hasn't been a good partner to cities, as governor. Most of his economic success stories have come from projects passed by the Biden administration, in which Senator Manchin played a key role passing. The Inflation Reduction Act has led to just countless investments in West Virginia. The legislation itself remains unpopular here because it's connected to President Biden, but what it's actually done for West Virginia is a lot of actual sort of demonstrable investments you can point to. And the governor shows up at the ribbon cuttings or groundbreakings for these projects, but he still blasts the Inflation Reduction Act in theory because it's easy to do when you're a Republican of West Virginia just to run against Democratic legislation. But the fact of the matter is, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the American Rescue Plan, which also came early on in Biden's term, all have had very visible impacts here in the state of West Virginia. And I'd love to, continue to help, give communities, let them know they have a partner in the Senate who understands what they need.
Now, shifting a little bit, because West Virginia's economy has historically been rooted in coal, and I know you've talked a bit about what the future of coal may or may not look like. How does that work? And also, I'd like to hear you talk about that a little bit, but also how new positions may come with this sort
Yeah.
of infrastructure spending, and how this kind of money coming in could create new jobs in other sectors as
Yeah.
well.
Sure. There's no doubt that coal has played a critical part of West Virginia history, both good and bad. It's obviously been an economic driver for lots of parts of the state, but it's also left a lot of communities, impacted from an environmental perspective, and most importantly, it's actually left a lot of coal miners either dead or impaired with black lung. We just met with a group of coal miners about a month ago in Raleigh County, West Virginia. All guys 65 and up who now have black lung, and it's really impacted their life. So. Coal's been a double-edged sword for West Virginia. But what I've been trying to tell folks on the campaign trail is, look, the rest of the world is going to move forward away from fossil fuels at some point, with or without us. We can either, recognize that and adapt accordingly, or we can continue doubling down on coal and just hoping that somehow the rest of the world gets it wrong. I think we need to continue to diversify our power production capacity. You do see some pockets around the state where we've adopted or sort of embraced wind turbines and wind energy. I was just driving through some the other night in Hardy County, seeing those turbines, all spinning pretty rapidly was exciting to see. It means we're embracing some clean power here. You do see pockets where we have, converted what was farmland into now solar farms, they're calling them. So it's great to see more of that. But we also need to be looking at some other sort of older technologies we got away from. I think we need to look at nuclear. We need to look at geothermal. We need to look at hydropower. There's some potentials. In the in the hydrogen economy, we haven't fully tapped into yet. So I want to see us do all of the above, and most importantly, I want to see, as that transition away from fossil fuels happens. I want to make sure that we have, worker retraining programs and community benefit programs to help those communities so impacted by it. We began our summer tour this year in the community of Welch, which is the county seat of McDowell County. It's in the southernmost part of the state. And McDowell County's population in 1950 was 100,000. It's now 18,000. It's been losing population for 60 plus years, and you can't tie it to the Biden or Obama administrations. It's really like it's a transition away from coal, and it's also a transition where coal mines were actually done with much more mechanization, so they required far fewer employees. McDowell County was devastated far before Obama or Biden came into office. So we need to let go of this idea that Democrats are out to get coal. What we need to Democrats just want us to be honest with the fact that the world's changing and coal is there's not going to be an ample market to buy coal in the future. You talk to Fortune 500 companies and people on those boards of directors, and they're going to tell you that the company bylaws at some point down the road are going to say all the energy that we purchase as a company has to come from cleaner renewable sources. So coal is going to be actually priced out of the market at some point. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prepare for that. And I think that separates me a little bit from some other West Virginia politicians who do want to continue, insisting on on exploiting our fossil fuels. I want to see them as a transition, but it's a transition to a cleaner, renewable economy, not something where, 10, 15 years from now, we're still talking about coal as the be all end all here in West Virginia, because quite frankly, it's been, as I said, a double-edged sword. It's had a boom or bust cycle, and it's led to a lot of wealth being created by a, a small number of people, but it's left a lot of communities definitely impacted. And like I said, it's actually destroyed the lives of far too many workers. We have to be looking at new ways to make power going forward.
Is it also possible to see a more booming tourist economy with an increase in infrastructure that allows people to get in and out of West Virginia
Yeah.
and into those pockets more easily?
Yeah. Tourism, if I'm being completely fair and objective, tourism is one area where my opponent's done okay as governor. He has made tourism a priority. The problem with tourism jobs, though, is that they tend to be service level jobs and not really career
Mm.
jobs. And so you don't want to predicate too much of your economic sort of growth on just tourism. We have incredible opportunities for tourism, and connecting us to the outside world through completing some of these interstate projects would certainly help with that. I think we are the most beautiful state on the eastern half of the country in terms of our topography, our waterways, our four seasons. We have a lot to offer. It may be tough to compete with a Colorado or Utah, but on the eastern half of the country, it doesn't get much better than West Virginia. And I know there's a lot of folks who come here each and every year because they love our fall colors. They love, we have some pretty good skiing, at least for East Coast skiing here. We have a lot of ways to fish and hike and all the other things that people like to do in the outdoors. But for me, tourism has to be a part of the solution. It can't be, I don't want to put too many eggs in that basket because, like I said, it
Okay.
doesn't really build a lot of high-paying jobs where people can afford to raise families on and stay in those communities long term. We have to do a better job than just tourism, but it needs to be a part of the overall equation.
All right. One last kind of point I want to make here. Um, Relating to Robert Byrd, I have a couple of quotes. This is actually a Robert Byrd quote. He said, "As long as there is a forum in which questions can be asked by men and women who do not stand in awe of a chief executive, and one can speak as long as one's feet will allow one to stand, the liberty of the American people will be secure."
Yes.
Do you believe that Jim Justice can not stand in awe of the chief executive?
Well, you certainly wouldn't expect that right now. Governor Justice has gone bends over backwards to make his fealty to the former president known every chance he can. He thinks it's in his he thinks it's in his political interest to brag about the fact that he has some alleged friendship with the former president. I think really what's happened is he's gone hunting with the former president's sons a couple of times, and he thinks now they're best buddies. But any chance he gets to praise the former president, he does. If he were elected and if the former president were reelected to that office, Jim Justice is not going to be someone who could stand up to him. And that's one lesson I got from Byrd. When I worked for Byrd all 5 years, President Clinton was in office. You had two Democrats, and if you thought for a minute that Senator Byrd saw his role as senator to take directions or orders from Bill Clinton, that you had nothing coming. He was probably as big of a thorn in Clinton's side as a senator, as a Democrat, as some of the Republicans were. He really saw the Senate and the chief executive as on an equal par. He felt the checks and balances were important, and he was someone who stood up to presidents of both parties. Anyone who wants to understand what Byrd, what he came to be at the end of his career, obviously he started out his career not in the best way. If you Google the man, the first thing on the
Yeah.
Wikipedia page is going to talk about early on in his life in the 1940s. As a young man, he was in the KKK. It went on to haunt him for the rest of his life. He left the Klan I think by 1948. Ultimately, ran for Congress and the Senate, but it haunted him his entire life. But as he grew into the statesman that he became, he really. Occupied a special place in Senate history as someone who really, I think, if you look at what the founding fathers had in mind for the Senate, I think Robert Byrd would have been uh, pretty high up in that list. Watch his speech. Anyone who wants to understand what Byrd was all about, watch his speech on the eve of the Iraq War in 2003. The entire country was basically scared into the idea that Saddam Hussein was going to attack us or have weapons of mass destruction. We were already hurting from 9/11, and the president at that time basically talked us into a war. Not many senators stood up and voted no on that, but Byrd did. But not only did he do that, the speech that he gave on the eve of that war, to me, is one of the best speeches on the Senate floor of the 21st century. It was begins with the words, "We stand here passively mute." And I'll never forget the way he gave that speech and the way so few other members of Congress were willing to stand up to a president who at the time was very popular because of the way he had responded to 9/11. It took a lot of courage to stand up to the president at that time and say, "This is not the time to start another war." And I think history will prove, if not already, that the Iraq War was a mistake of gargantuan proportions in terms of the lives lost, in terms of the instability brought to that region. And so Byrd, to me embodies really what this, I mean, the special role that the Senate plays in the history of our country. And I think anyone who wants to be a good senator should be willing to stand up to the chief executive on whatever issue, if it is that important to them, if it's something of issue of constitutional importance or just actually important to your core. Byrd was willing to do that time and time again, especially on that particular occasion. Jim Justice, if the president is of his own party, is going to be a rubber stamp because he's not going to put much effort into knowing the issues. He's not someone who can talk with great comfort about federal policy. He's frankly is not a details guy. I think he'd tell you that himself. He's not a details guy, and so what he would end up doing is relying on other people to tell him what to do. And if the former president were reelected, Jim Justice would be nothing but a rubber stamp. You can mark that or take that to the bank.
And Lindsey Graham also said that Byrd will be viewed by history as one of the giants of the Senate. So he was respected on both sides. So we're down to my
Sure,
last question, which is my
sure.
favorite question. I call it my softball question, but I would like you to tell me what. And normally I ask about your district, but since you're representing the whole state, I would like you to tell me what about West Virginia makes it special to you.
Oh goodness, West Virginia is so many different things. To me, we are a people that I think we've always had a little bit of a chip on our shoulders because we feel like a lot of the outside world, doesn't pay attention to us or takes us for granted. West Virginia jokes. If you're from West Virginia, you've traveled anywhere around the country, people are going to say West Virginia jokes about you. And I think that's made us a little bit, we have that chip on our shoulder. But once we let you in, once you come here, um, you know, I think we are the warmest people you're going to find anywhere in the country. I run into West Virginia people anywhere, and immediately there's a bond there. Whether folks are wearing the WU closing for our state school, Western University, whether they're wearing a country road shirt or something to say they're from West Virginia, wherever you are, you're going to go up to them and say hi because you have some connection. Because look, we have not experienced great economic growth in the state. We remain one of the poorest states in the country. We remain one of the least healthy states. We need now more than ever really to focus on investing in ourselves. But I think our just going through life the way so many of us have here, we've developed thick skin and we have a can-do attitude. And I think we look for leaders who embody that. And for me in this campaign, a lot of it's been drawing a contrast between the governor and myself. The governor is someone born into great wealth, and I have nothing against those born into great wealth, but he's never taken the time or energy to try to put himself in the shoes of those who weren't into the position he was. He thinks, he has an entitlement mentality. Even painted his own dog into the state capitol rotunda, sort of an homage to his own pet. He thinks that what's ours is his. I was born into a mobile home, and everything that I have in life, I've worked so hard for myself to get. I understand and can identify with a lot uh, of West Virginians in terms of of the challenges that they face, of the struggles we face, of leaving the state and having people make assumptions about you because you're from West Virginia. I think our state is such a wonderful place. But it's long past time we all stick together and actually, make sure that going forward, we're going to demand better of ourselves and demand more of our leaders. And and look for leaders who are honest with us about ways we need to change and improve ourselves too. I think the opportunity is certainly here. I love the state with all my heart. I want to spend the rest of my life here, and on a personal level, I have a young son and a daughter due in November. Yeah, I want my kids to grow up here and see a future in West Virginia that I, as a young man, didn't. When I turned 18, I just wanted out, and that's the story of a lot of folks around the state. Our young folks have left. Decade after decade. I want to see a West Virginia where when you turn 18, staying here and investing here and being part of a community here, growing a business here is a realistic opportunity for everybody. And I think we're so close to getting it right. But it starts with each and every election. We have to make sure we put the right people there. And it would be my honor to be our state's next West Virginia U.S. Senator.
Glenn Elliott is running to represent the state of West Virginia in the United States Senate. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks a lot, Brian. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Best of luck. Thank you.